Tonight, we tell a story meant for the quiet hours. A story that moves slowly, without urgency, without noise. This is not a story to rush through. It is a story to settle into, like rain against a window, like the hum of a distant road, like the steady rhythm of your breath as the day fades away. Tonight, we tell the story of Kobe Bryant. Not the highlights you've already seen, not the championships, not the moments that loop endlessly on screens, but the moments that lived in between. The early mornings when the gym lights were still off, the late nights when the world had gone silent, the decisions that no one filmed, the work no one applauded, because that is where this story truly begins. Before Kobe Bryant became a name the world recognized, he was simply a boy looking for something steady, something that made sense, something that stayed the same when everything else changed. And he found that steadiness in repetition, in the sound of a ball bouncing on hardwood, in the familiar weight of it resting in his hands, in the quiet rhythm of movement and breath. That rhythm became a kind of peace. This story is not about being born great. It is about becoming something slowly, patiently, without shortcuts. It is about choosing the same difficult thing every day, even when no one is watching, even when no one cares, even when the results are invisible. That choice is rarely loud. It happens in silence. And silence for Kobe became home. As you listen, you may notice your thoughts drifting. That is okay. You do not need to hold on to every word. This story will continue gently in the background, moving forward whether you are paying attention or not. Because this story does not demand your focus. It offers calm. Kobe's journey would eventually become loud. Arenas would roar. Cameras would follow. Voices would judge. But none of that existed yet. At the beginning, there was only stillness, only empty space, only time. And in that empty space, he began to learn something most people never do. That improvement is quiet, that progress is slow, that the work that matters most often happens when no one is there to see it. This is the world we enter now, before the fame, before the pressure, before the expectations. A world where nothing is promised and everything is built by hand. A world where a boy picks up a ball, not knowing where it will lead, only knowing that he will return to it again tomorrow. There is a moment in every life before the world begins to watch. A moment when effort is private, when mistakes belong only to you, when growth happens without witnesses. For Kobe Bryant, this moment lasted years, and it shaped everything that followed. In those early days, basketball was not a career. It was not a dream. It was a routine, something that existed whether the day was good or bad. If the world felt confusing, the ball made sense. If everything else was loud, the court was quiet. The gym did not judge him. It did not ask questions. It simply waited. And every time Kobe stepped inside, he felt the same calm settle over him. A calm that came from knowing exactly what to do. Dribble, shoot, rebound, repeat, over and over. This rhythm became his anchor. While other children searched for excitement, Kobe searched for consistency. While others chased attention, he chased improvement. Not all at once, not quickly, but steadily. The work was never glamorous. There were no crowds, no applause, no trophies waiting at the end of practice. Only the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had done the work for that day, and then knowing he would do it again tomorrow. This was not discipline in the way people imagine it. It was not forced. It was not painful. It was chosen. And because it was chosen, it became part of who he was. Long before anyone called it dedication, long before anyone named it obsession, it was simply a habit of showing up, a habit of staying, a habit of repeating the same motion until it felt effortless. And slowly, without ceremony, those habits began to shape him. They shaped the way he moved, the way he thought, the way he reacted when things went wrong. Because when something failed, he did not panic. He returned to the gym. When something hurt, he did not complain. He adjusted. This was the foundation being built, not with words, not with promises, but with time. And time, when used this way, became his greatest advantage. The world would one day call this mindset rare. They would call it special. But in these quiet hours, it was simply normal. Just another night. Just another practice. Just another step forward, taken without anyone noticing. It is easy to believe that greatness begins with a moment, a decision, a breakthrough, a single turning point. But most greatness does not begin that way. It begins with days that look the same, with mornings that feel ordinary, with nights that end quietly, with effort that leaves no mark on the world. That is where Kobe's story truly starts. Before anyone believed in him, he believed in the process. Not because he was confident, but because the process was reliable. The work always gave something back. Not immediately, not dramatically, but eventually. And that was enough. There is a kind of peace that comes when you stop chasing outcomes and begin trusting repetition. Kobe found that peace early, and he protected it. He protected it from distractions, from opinions, from the noise of the world. Because inside that quiet routine, he could hear himself think. This is what separated him. Not talent alone, not ambition alone, but patience. The willingness to stay with something long enough for it to change him. As the years passed, the world around him would grow louder. Expectations would rise. Pressure would build. But the foundation was already set. And foundations, when built slowly, do not shake easily. Tonight, we begin here, in stillness, in repetition, in the space where no one is watching. Because everything that follows, every triumph, every failure, every lesson, was shaped in this quiet beginning. As the story continues, we will move forward into childhood, into family, into the first real challenges. But remember this moment. Remember the silence. Because no matter how loud the world becomes, this is where Kobe always returned. To the gym, to the work, to the calm. And now, as the night deepens, we take the first step forward. Kobe Bryant was born into a world that already moved to the rhythm of a bouncing ball. On August 23, 1978, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, his story began quietly. There were no headlines, no expectations. Just a family, a small home, and a game that would slowly shape everything. His father, Joe Bryant, was a professional basketball player. He was known as Jelly Bean. Not famous, not celebrated, but steady. And steadiness is something children learn to trust. From a young age, Kobe watched his father closely. Not just during games, but before them. He noticed how Joe prepared, how he stretched, how he focused, how he repeated the same movements day after day. Those routines mattered. They showed Kobe that success was built quietly, long before anyone noticed. Basketball was never forced on him. There were no commands, no pressure. The ball was simply always there, in the corner of the room, by the door, resting near his bed. When Kobe was restless, he dribbled. When he was bored, he shot. When the world felt uncertain, he practiced. The game became a kind of language, a way to understand himself before he had words for his feelings. It gave shape to his days. His mother, Pam, noticed this early. She saw how the game calmed him, how it focused him, how it gave him direction. So she let it grow naturally, slowly, patiently. In those early years, Kobe was not loud. He listened more than he spoke. He observed everything. And when he practiced with intention, not to impress, not to win, but to understand. This was the beginning of something important. Not greatness, not fame, but comfort. A comfort with routine, a comfort with effort, a comfort with being alone with his thoughts. Before the world began to watch, before expectations appeared, there was only a boy learning how to focus, learning how to repeat, learning how to stay. As Kobe grew older, the game began to take on more meaning. It was no longer just something he did. It became something he returned to, every day without being asked. Joe Bryant's career meant that basketball was always nearby. Sometimes it meant long drives, sometimes late nights, sometimes empty seats in the stands while Kobe waited. But it also meant access, access to gyms, to courts, to spaces most children never saw, and Kobe used them. He would wander onto the court when no one else was there. The lights were dim, the air was still, and the court felt like it belonged only to him. Those moments taught him something important. That work did not need an audience. That effort was still real, even when it was unseen. Joe never pushed him. He never demanded more. He simply showed him by example what it meant to respect the craft, to arrive early, to stay late, to leave knowing you had done your best for the day. Kobe absorbed all of it, quietly. At home, basketball blended into daily life. The ball bounced through hallways, rolled under tables, rested in corners. It was as normal as dinner, as normal as sleep. And because it was normal, it never felt like pressure. There were days Kobe failed, days he missed everything, days the ball refused to cooperate. But failure never made him angry. It made him curious. He would try again, and again, and again. Slowly, he began to understand something most children never notice. That effort creates calm, that repetition creates control, that the world feels less confusing when you focus on one simple thing and do it well. The game became his anchor. When school felt overwhelming, he practiced. When the world felt loud, he practiced. When nothing made sense, he practiced. And in those quiet repetitions, a foundation was being laid. Not for championships, not for fame, but for discipline. The kind of discipline that does not need motivation. The kind that becomes part of who you are. As the years passed, Kobe began to understand something about himself. He liked structure. He liked knowing what came next. And basketball gave him that. Every day could be broken into simple pieces. Practice, rest, repeat. It did not matter if the day had been good or bad. The routine stayed the same. And because the routine stayed the same, the world felt steady. This was not something he learned from books. It was something he felt in his body. When he practiced, his mind became quiet. When he focused on the ball, everything else faded away. Joe noticed this. He saw how deeply his son connected to the game, not as entertainment, but as a place to think, a place to breathe, a place to belong. So when opportunities came for the family to move, Joe and Pam made a decision, a difficult one that would take them far from home. Joe's career was shifting overseas, and with it, the family would leave everything familiar behind. Friends, schools, streets they knew by heart. Kobe was still young. He did not fully understand what this meant, but he could feel it. Change was coming. In the days before they left, Kobe spent more time in the gym than usual, not because he was afraid, but because he needed the calm. The ball was still there. The floor still echoed. And that was enough. When the plane finally lifted into the sky, Philadelphia disappeared below them. And with it, the first chapter of Kobe's life closed. He did not know it yet, but the years ahead would teach him something new. How to be alone, how to listen, how to find comfort in silence. The foundation had been set. Now it would be tested. When Kobe was 6 years old, his world shifted again. Not with noise, not with warning, but with distance. The plane crossed the ocean, and everything familiar faded behind him. Philadelphia disappeared. Friends disappeared. Streets he knew by heart disappeared. In their place came a new country, Italy. The air felt different there. The streets were narrow, the buildings old, the pace slower. People spoke a language he did not understand. And for the first time in his life, Kobe felt truly quiet. At school, he listened more than he spoke. He watched faces. He noticed gestures. He learned meaning through tone and movement. Silence became his teacher. When the day ended, he returned to the one thing that still felt familiar: a basketball. The gyms in Italy were small, sometimes cold, often empty. The lights were dim, and the echoes were loud. Each dribble bounced back at him, clear and sharp, and in that sound he found comfort. He practiced alone, not because he had to, because he wanted to. The gym was a place where no one expected anything from him. No explanations, no words, just movement. At first, the ball felt heavy. The rim felt unforgiving. Shots missed more often than they fell, but no one was watching, so failure felt safe. He tried again, and again, and again. In those quiet gyms, he learned something important. That silence is not empty. It is full of information. It tells you what works, what doesn't, what to fix, what to repeat. Slowly, the language barrier stopped mattering. The game spoke clearly, and every evening, as the sun faded outside, Kobe returned to the court. One more time, one more repetition, one more chance to understand the game a little better. In Italy, time moved differently. Days were longer. Nights were quieter. There was no rush to be anywhere, no pressure to impress. And for a young boy, this slowness changed everything. Kobe began to spend hours alone in the gym, not because anyone told him to, not because it was required, but because it felt right. The court became a place where the world finally made sense. He learned to listen to the sound of the ball. Each bounce told him something. Too hard, too soft, too fast, too slow. He adjusted without thinking. Again and again, there were days when he missed every shot. Days when nothing worked. But no one was there to see it. So he stayed. And when something finally clicked, it felt like a secret only he knew. He began to study the game differently. He watched older players, not for highlights, but for details, footwork, balance, timing. Then he went back to the gym and tried to copy what he saw. The isolation was not loneliness. It was freedom. No one compared him to anyone else. No one told him what he should be. He could build himself quietly, one repetition at a time. Sometimes his father would watch, not speaking, not correcting, just observing. And Kobe learned that trust was silent. As months turned into years, something inside him began to change. He became more patient, more focused, more comfortable with stillness. The boy who once needed noise to feel alive now found peace in silence. He learned that progress did not need witnesses, that effort did not need applause. That work done in secret still counted. These lessons settled deep inside him. They became part of how he moved, how he thought, how he approached everything. Italy was not just a place he lived. It was a place that shaped him. In Italy, time moved differently. Days were longer. Nights were quieter. There was no rush to be anywhere. No pressure to impress. And for a young boy, this slowness changed everything. Kobe began to spend hours alone in the gym. Not because anyone told him to. Not because it was required. But because it felt right. The court became a place where the world finally made sense. He learned to listen to the sound of the ball. Each bounce told him something. Too hard, too soft, too fast, too slow. He adjusted without thinking. Again and again. There were days when he missed every shot. days when nothing worked, but no one was there to see it, so he stayed. And when something finally clicked, it felt like a secret only he knew. He began to study the game differently. He watched older players, not for highlights, but for details. Footwork, balance, timing. Then he went back to the gym and tried to copy what he saw. The isolation was not loneliness. It was freedom. No one compared him to anyone else. No one told him what he should be. He could build himself quietly, one repetition at a time. Sometimes his father would watch, not speaking, not correcting, just observing. And Kobe learned that trust was silent. As months turned into years, something inside him began to change. He became more patient, more focused, more comfortable with stillness. The boy who once needed noise to feel alive now found peace in silence. He learned that progress did not need witnesses, that effort did not need applause, that work done in secret still counted. These lessons settled deep inside him. They became part of how he moved, how he thought, how he approached everything. Italy was not just a place he lived. It was a place that shaped him. As the years passed, the quiet became normal. What once felt strange now felt necessary. Kobe no longer looked for noise. He looked for space. Space to move, space to think, space to repeat. The gyms became familiar. The rims, the floors, the echoes. He could tell where he was just by the sound of the ball. Each court had its own voice. And he listened. Sometimes he practiced in the early morning, the air still cool, the city barely awake. Other times, late at night, when the lights flickered and the silence felt deeper. He did not care. The work was the same. Italy taught him something no coach ever could, that being alone was not something to fear. It was something to use. When you are alone, you hear your mistakes more clearly. When you are alone, you cannot hide from effort. And Kobe never hid. He stayed with the work, even when it was boring, even when it was frustrating, even when it felt endless. These were the years no one would talk about later. No records, no trophies, no headlines. But these years were everything. Because when the family eventually returned to the United States, Kobe returned different. He moved with patience. He practiced with intention. He listened more than he spoke. The boy who left had been a child. The one who came back already carried the habits of a professional. He did not know it yet, but the silence he learned to live with would become his greatest strength. And when the world finally grew loud, when expectations arrived, when pressure followed him everywhere, he would remember this place. The quiet gyms, the empty courts, the steady echo of the ball, because that silence never left him. It became part of who he was. When Kobe returned to the United States, people noticed a difference. Not immediately, not loudly, but in the way he moved, in the way he practiced, in the way he stayed long after everyone else had gone home. The silence he learned in Italy had followed him back, and now it had something new to feed on. Competition. High school gyms were louder, fuller, more crowded. But Kobe still searched for the empty hours. Early mornings before classes began. Late nights when the lights were almost off. He wanted the court to himself, because that was where the work felt real. Other players practiced to prepare for games. Kobe practiced to understand himself. He repeated the same moves until they felt automatic. Not because a coach told him to, because his body demanded it. He began to see flaws others ignored. Foot placement, timing, balance, small things, invisible things. But he knew those details were the difference between good and great. There were days when he practiced longer than he played. Days when the ball felt heavy in his hands. Days when nothing worked. And instead of leaving, he stayed. Because leaving meant accepting limits. And Kobe did not believe in limits yet. This was the beginning of obsession, not the kind that burns loudly, not the kind that shows itself off, but the kind that grows quietly, day by day, hour by hour, repetition by repetition. Friends noticed. They invited him out. He said no. Teammates finished practice. He stayed. Coaches locked the doors. He found another gym. This was not sacrifice to him. It was comfort. Because when he practiced, everything else went quiet. Slowly, the work began to show, not in highlights, but in consistency, in the way he never panicked, in the way he never rushed, in the way mistakes no longer surprised him. He was becoming someone different, someone who did not need motivation, someone who did not need praise, someone who only needed time. As the weeks passed, Kobe's routine became unbreakable, not because it was written down, but because it was felt. He woke up thinking about the gym. He fell asleep planning the next session. The work followed him everywhere. At school, his mind drifted toward the court, not out of boredom, out of anticipation. He replayed moves in his head, imagined angles, adjusted footwork before ever stepping on the floor. When practice ended, he stayed behind. When teammates left, he stayed. When the lights dimmed, he stayed. And when the gym finally closed, he found another one. Sometimes it was a small community court, sometimes a college gym, sometimes just a driveway with a rim. It did not matter. The work was the same. There were nights when his hands burned, when his legs felt heavy, when his shots fell short again and again. But he did not count makes. He counted repetitions, because repetition was the goal. This was not about proving anything to anyone else. It was about proving something to himself, that he could stay longer, that he could focus deeper, that he could keep going when everything in his body wanted to stop. Slowly, he began to separate from others his age, not because he thought he was better, but because his life moved differently. While others rested, he repeated. While others celebrated, he trained. And over time, that difference became visible. Opponents noticed first. They felt it in the way he never tired, in the way he never rushed, in the way he always seemed ready for one more moment. Then coaches noticed. They saw a player who did not need reminders, who did not waste drills, who treated every rep like it mattered. And still, Kobe said nothing. He let the work speak. This was no longer just practice. It was identity. It was the way he understood himself. The obsession was now complete, and it was no longer quiet. It was steady, permanent, unmovable. By the time people began to notice, it was already too late to stop. The habit had settled into him, not as a choice, but as a rhythm. Kobe no longer asked whether he should train. The question had disappeared. The answer was always the same. Every missed shot became information. Every mistake became a lesson. He stopped seeing failure as something to avoid. He saw it as a map showing him exactly where to go next. This changed the way he played. When pressure arrived, he did not panic. He had already lived in discomfort for years. When the moment felt heavy, he felt familiar. Because the work had prepared him for weight, teammates noticed something else too. He was calm, not relaxed, calm. The kind of calm that comes from knowing you have done everything you could do. This obsession was not about anger. It was not about proving people wrong. It was about control. Control over effort. Control over preparation. Control over his own limits. And control brought freedom. Because when you control the work, you stop fearing the outcome. Kobe did not know the word for it yet, but the world would one day call it the Mamba mentality. Not a slogan, not a brand, a way of living. But for now, it was simply his routine. The same early mornings, the same late nights, the same quiet courts, This obsession would carry him forward, through high school, through the draft, into the NBA. It would follow him everywhere, and it would demand everything. By the time Kobe entered Lower Merion High School, the work had already shaped him. He was not louder than anyone else. He was not stronger. He was not older, but he was prepared. From the first practice, his presence was felt, not because he demanded attention, but because he never wasted a moment. When drills began, he was already focused. When they ended, he stayed. High school gyms were different from the ones in Italy. They were louder, busier, full of energy and movement. But Kobe still searched for quiet. He arrived early. He left late. He made the gym feel empty, even when it was full. Game by game, his confidence grew. Not the kind that shows itself off, the kind that stays steady. When shots fell, he stayed calm. When they missed, he stayed calm. Because the work did not change. Opponents noticed first. They felt it in the way he never rushed, in the way he never panicked, in the way he seemed ready for whatever came next. Coaches noticed soon after. They saw a player who listened, who adjusted, who learned quickly, and when they asked more of him, he gave more. Lower Merion began to win, quietly at first, then consistently. Crowds grew larger. Newspapers appeared, scouts filled the stands. But Kobe's routine did not change. After games, while teammates celebrated, he returned to the gym, sometimes alone, sometimes with the lights already dimmed. He replayed mistakes, he repeated shots, he treated every game like a lesson. This was no longer just preparation. It was proof that the years of quiet work had mattered. And as his final year approached, a decision began to form. A decision that would change everything. Kobe's senior year arrived with weight. Every game felt different now. The gym filled earlier. The crowd stayed longer. Eyes followed every movement. Expectations had found him. Opponents played harder. Defenses closed faster. Every mistake was noticed. But Kobe did not change. He trusted the routine that had brought him here. Game after game, he delivered, not with flash, with control. He scored when the team needed points. He defended when the moment demanded it. And when the game tightened, he stayed calm. Lower Merion's season became a march, one win after another. The state tournament approached, and with it, a quiet belief. This team could finish it. In the championship game, the pressure was heavy. The crowd was loud. The air felt tight. But Kobe had been preparing for this moment for years, in empty gyms, in silence, in repetition. When the final buzzer sounded, Lower Merion were champions. The celebration was loud. The moment was real. But even then, Kobe's mind moved forward. College offers arrived. Letters stacked up. Coaches called. Every path was open. And yet, another path waited. The NBA. A path few 17-year-olds ever took. A path filled with risk, with doubt, with uncertainty. People warned him. They said it was too soon, that he should wait, that he should be safe. But Kobe did not feel fear. He felt readiness. He had been living like a professional for years. The hours, the discipline, the repetition. Nothing about the NBA scared him. So quietly, without drama, he made the decision. He would declare for the draft. It was not confidence. It was clarity. The decision was made quietly. There was no celebration, no announcement. Just a sense of calm that settled in Kobe's chest. At 17 years old, he stepped into a world that did not wait for anyone. The NBA draft approached. Scouts analyzed him. Media questioned him. Adults doubted him. But Kobe did not argue. He returned to the gym. While others debated his future, he prepared for it. He trained with the same routine, the same repetition, the same silence. Nothing changed. Draft night arrived. The room was full of suits and cameras. Names were called. Time moved slowly. And then it happened. Kobe Bryant. 17th overall. The moment was brief. A handshake. A smile. And then it was over. Childhood ended in that instant. The work became heavier. The stakes became real. He would not attend college. He would not have time to adjust slowly. He was entering the league as a teenager. But Kobe felt ready, not because he knew everything, but because he trusted his habits. As the night ended, he did not celebrate. He went home. He rested. And the next morning, he went back to the gym, because that was the only way he knew how to move forward. The next chapter was waiting, and it would not be gentle. The NBA did not slow down for Kobe Bryant. It did not soften itself. It did not care that he was young. The league moved fast, and it expected him to keep up. At 17, he walked into locker rooms filled with men who had spent years earning their place. Bodies were heavier. Voices were louder. Mistakes were punished immediately. And every night, the margin for error was small. Practices were different here. Faster, sharper, less forgiving. Moves that worked in high school no longer worked. Shots that once felt easy now felt rushed. And Kobe felt it. He missed shots. He made mistakes. He learned quickly that talent was not enough. Minutes came and went. Some nights he played. Some nights he watched. And when he watched, he studied. He watched footwork, spacing, timing. He learned how professionals moved when the game slowed down. The criticism came early. Too young, too confident, not ready. Words followed him everywhere. But Kobe did not respond with words. He responded with work. After games, when the arena emptied, he went back to the gym. He replayed mistakes in his mind. He repeated the shots he missed. He stayed until the building was quiet again. There were nights he questioned himself, not because he doubted the dream, but because the work felt endless. But every time doubt appeared, he answered it the same way. One more rep, one more shot, one more hour. The league was teaching him a lesson. That effort had to grow. That patience mattered. That nothing would be given to him. And slowly, the game began to slow down. The mistakes were not hidden. They happened in front of thousands of people, and millions more watching from home. In the 1997 playoffs, the moment arrived too early. Kobe took shots he should not have taken. He missed again and again. Air balls. The crowd reacted. The cameras stayed close, and the narrative formed quickly. Too young. Too much confidence. Not ready. That night followed him. Not in the newspapers. Not in interviews. But in his mind. Most players would have avoided the gym after a night like that. Kobe did the opposite. He went back. He replayed every shot, every decision, not with anger, with focus. He wanted to understand why. And once he understood, he worked. He lifted weights until his body burned. He practiced footwork until his legs shook. He shot until his arms felt heavy. And then he shot again. There was no revenge in his training, only correction. Slowly, the league noticed. His movements became sharper. His decisions became quicker. His confidence became quieter. Veterans watched him differently now. Coaches trusted him more. Minutes increased. He was still young, still learning, still making mistakes. But now he was prepared for them. The game began to feel familiar again. Not easy, but understandable. The NBA was no longer overwhelming. It was challenging, and Kobe welcomed that, because challenge meant growth. By his second season, something had changed. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but steadily. The game slowed down. The floor looked wider. The noise faded into the background. And in that space, Kobe began to play freely. He no longer rushed. He trusted his feet. He trusted his preparation. He trusted the hours no one saw. When mistakes happened, they no longer shook him. He had already failed in public and survived. Coaches noticed his growth. They gave him more responsibility, more minutes, more trust, and he carried it carefully. The league began to see him differently, not as a teenager, but as a professional. There were still nights of struggle, still nights of doubt, but there were more nights of clarity, more nights where everything felt aligned. Kobe had passed his first test. He had learned the pace. He had learned the weight. He had learned the cost. And now a new chapter was waiting. A partnership, a presence, a force that would change everything. Because soon another star would arrive in Los Angeles. And together they would reshape the league. When Shaquille O'Neal arrived in Los Angeles, the energy of the team changed instantly. He was impossible to ignore. Larger than everyone else, stronger than everyone else, louder than everyone else. And yet, what he brought was not noise. It was gravity. Defenses collapsed the moment he touched the ball. Entire game plans bent around his presence. And suddenly, space appeared everywhere else on the floor. Space Kobe had never seen before. At first, the partnership was simple. Shaq dominated inside. Kobe attacked from the outside. Power and precision. It worked immediately. Wins came easily. The team moved with confidence, and the city began to believe again. Practices changed. They became sharper, more intense, more demanding. Kobe arrived early, as always. Shaq arrived with presence. Two very different approaches, but one shared goal. In games, the connection grew. Shaq drew the defense. Kobe punished it. When Shaq needed rest, Kobe carried the load. When Kobe was trapped, Shaq finished everything inside. The league struggled to adjust. No one had answers, and the Lakers began to rise. In 2000, the championship arrived. Then again in 2001, and again in 2002. 3 titles in a row. A dynasty. The crowd roared. The banners rose. The world watched. But inside the locker room, something else was forming. Kobe wanted more. More structure. More discipline. More work. Shaq wanted balance. Both wanted to win. But they wanted it differently. The difference was small at first. Barely noticeable. But pressure has a way of widening cracks. And as the wins piled up, so did the weight. As the championships stacked up, the pressure changed. Winning no longer felt like success. It felt like expectation, and expectation is heavy. Every season began with the same question. Can they do it again? Every loss felt louder than it should have. Every mistake was magnified. And inside the team, the silence grew. Kobe and Shaq were still winning, but they were no longer moving in the same rhythm. Shaq trusted his natural dominance. He believed the game would always come to him. Kobe trusted preparation. He believed the game only came to those who chased it. Neither approach was wrong, but they were different. And difference, under constant pressure, becomes tension. Practices became sharper. Words became shorter. Looks lasted longer. The media noticed everything. Every pause, every quote, every glance. Kobe pushed harder. He demanded more from himself and from everyone around him. Sometimes teammates followed. Sometimes they resisted. But Kobe did not slow down. To him, slowing down felt like losing control. Shaq, on the other hand, carried the weight differently. He smiled more. He trusted his talent. He believed things would work themselves out. The difference in philosophy began to show, not in the wins, but in the spaces between them. On the court, they were still perfect. Off the court, they were distant. And distance, when left unattended, grows. The dynasty still stood, but its foundation was starting to strain. As the years passed, the weight of success became impossible to ignore. Winning had brought everything they wanted, and everything they didn't. The locker room was quieter now. Not calm. Quiet in the way storms feel quiet before they break. Kobe felt the pressure differently than anyone else. He carried it home. He carried it into the gym. He carried it into every practice. To him, the dynasty was not something to enjoy. It was something to protect. Shaq carried it differently. He believed dominance should feel easy. That joy mattered. That the game should still be fun. These differences were never resolved. They were postponed. And postponed tension always returns. The media circled. Every comment became a headline. Every silence became a story. And slowly, the noise outside began to seep inside. When losses came, they felt heavier than championships ever did. Because losses exposed the cracks. Eventually, the decision was made. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. Shaquille O'Neal would leave Los Angeles. The dynasty ended not with a collapse, but with a pause. A long, heavy pause. When Shaq left, Kobe walked into the gym alone. No partner, no shield, no one to share the weight. For the first time in years, everything was his. The team, the pressure, the expectations. He picked up the ball and began again. When the dynasty ended, the silence felt different. Not peaceful, not calm, heavy. For the first time in years, Kobe walked into the gym without a partner. No balance, no contrast. No one to share the weight of expectation. Everything was his now. The wins, the losses, the blame, the responsibility. The roster changed often. New faces, new systems, new questions. And through it all, the expectations never left. People wanted to know if he could lead alone, if he could win alone, if he was enough. Kobe heard the questions, but he did not answer them with words. He answered them the only way he knew how. With work. He trained harder than ever. Longer sessions, earlier mornings, later nights. The gym became his shelter, a place where doubt could not follow him. But loneliness has a way of finding space. Even in rooms full of people, teammates respected him, but they did not always understand him. The pace he demanded felt impossible to some. The discipline felt heavy, and slowly distance grew. Kobe felt it. He felt the space between himself and the team, but he did not know how to close it, so he returned to the gym. The media grew louder. Criticism sharpened. Losses were dissected. Every mistake was framed as proof that he could not do it alone. Kobe listened. And then he trained. He did not run from pressure. He absorbed it. Let it settle. Let it harden him. But pressure, when carried alone, changes you. It quiets you. It isolates you. It makes you look inward. And Kobe began to look inward more than ever before. As the seasons passed, the weight did not lift. It settled. And Kobe carried it every day. Losses hurt more now. Not because they happened, but because they felt personal. Every missed shot felt like a message. Every failed possession felt like a question. Was this enough? Was he enough? He responded the same way every time. He trained. He arrived before anyone else. He left after everyone else. The gym lights became familiar again. The echoes returned. And with them, the calm he had learned years earlier in Italy. But this time, the silence felt heavier. Because now, he knew what was at stake. There were nights he sat alone in the locker room. The arena empty, the noise gone. Only his breath and his thoughts remaining. And in those moments, he felt the loneliness most clearly. Teammates came and went. Some stayed, some left. But the expectations never changed, and Kobe never lowered them. The media questioned his leadership. He was too demanding, too intense, too focused on himself. And maybe, in some ways, they were right. But Kobe did not know how to lead differently. He led the way he trained, by example. He expected others to follow. And when they didn't, he pulled away. This was the hardest part of his career. Not the injuries, not the losses, the isolation. Because greatness, when chased alone, can feel like a long road with no one beside you. And still, he did not stop, because stopping felt worse. The pressure was shaping him, sharpening him, but it was also taking something. And Kobe could feel it. Slowly, something began to change. Not on the scoreboard, not in the headlines. Inside him, Kobe began to understand that effort alone was not enough. That leadership required more than example. That discipline, when carried too tightly, could push people away. This realization did not come easily. It came through loss, through seasons that ended too early, through moments where the work did not seem to matter. And in that frustration, he began to listen, not just to the game, but to people. He spoke less, observed more. He learned when to push and when to pause. The loneliness did not disappear, but it softened. It became something he could carry without breaking. And in that space, a new kind of leadership began to form. One built on patience, not just pressure. The team slowly changed, not overnight, but steadily. The work remained. The obsession remained. But it was no longer lonely. It was shared. Kobe had survived the hardest part, the part no one sees, the part where doubt lives, the part where isolation tests your resolve. And now, with the lessons learned, he was ready for the next chapter. A chapter of mastery, of control, of purpose. When the pieces finally began to fit, the change was subtle, not loud, not sudden, but undeniable. Kobe entered his peak years with a different presence. He no longer rushed. He no longer forced. He moved with control. The game had slowed for him. Defenders felt predictable. Moments felt familiar. And for the first time, he played without tension. He had learned when to attack, when to wait, when to pass, when to finish. This was not talent maturing. It was understanding. The work he had done in silence for years now revealed itself in small, precise moments. A pivot done perfectly. A pause that froze defenders. A shot released at exactly the right time. Opponents felt it. They knew what he wanted to do. And still, they could not stop it. The league watched him differently now. Not as a scorer, not as a star, but as a craftsman. These were the years when basketball became language again, when every movement had meaning, when every step had purpose. Kobe no longer chased numbers. He chased precision. He chased control. He chased the feeling of a perfect sequence of movements coming together. The gym was still his home. But now, the work felt lighter, because he knew exactly what he was building. The noise of doubt had faded. In its place was clarity. And with clarity came confidence, the quiet kind, the kind that does not need to speak. During these years, the game seemed to bend around him, not because he was faster, not because he was stronger, but because he was calmer. Kobe no longer rushed moments. He waited for them. He watched defenders shift their weight. He felt when balance was lost. He moved only when the opening was real. The floor felt wider now. Passing lanes appeared earlier. Angles revealed themselves before they existed. And when the moment arrived, he was already prepared. There were nights when nothing could stop him. Shots fell softly. Movements flowed without effort. And the basket felt impossibly wide. But even on those nights, Kobe did not celebrate. He simply noted what worked. In 2006, he scored 81 points in a single game. The world reacted in disbelief. But Kobe treated it as confirmation, not surprise, because that night was built from years of repetition, thousands of quiet hours, thousands of shots taken alone. Championships returned in 2009 and again in 2010. This time, they felt different. There was no urgency, no desperation, only control. Teammates trusted him completely now, not because he demanded it, but because his calm made them believe. He taught by example, by arriving early, by staying late, by never wasting a rep. The obsession had matured. It was no longer sharp or restless. It was steady, focused, sustainable, and steady is what lasts. As the seasons passed, Kobe began to play less for the moment and more for the meaning behind it. He no longer chased nights that would be remembered. He chased nights that felt complete. He studied the game differently now. He watched younger players. He adjusted his footwork. He refined his angles. Not because he was losing something, but because mastery demands evolution. Each season, something changed. A release became softer. A step became shorter. A pause became longer. Small adjustments, invisible to most, essential to him. Basketball became conversation again, a language spoken without words. Every movement had intention. Every decision carried calm. The league respected him in a different way now, not for highlights, but for habits, for preparation, for consistency. And for the first time, Kobe allowed himself to enjoy the game, not loudly, not for cameras, but quietly, in moments between plays, in practice sessions that felt lighter, in wins that felt earned. He had reached the place he had always been working toward. Not the top, but control. Yet time never stops moving. And slowly, almost gently, his body began to remind him. The work had taken its cost. The seasons, the minutes, the landings. They had added up, and a new challenge waited. Not a defender, not a rival, but time itself. Time always arrives quietly. It does not announce itself. It does not ask permission. One day, the body responds the way it always has. And then, one day it doesn't. For Kobe Bryant, the change began slowly. A stiffness that lasted longer. A soreness that did not fade overnight. A warm-up that needed more time. Nothing dramatic at first. Just reminders. He ignored them. Not out of arrogance. Out of habit. For his entire life, effort had been the answer. If something hurt, he worked through it. If something failed, he repeated it. So he did the same with his body. But the years had accumulated. The landings, the cuts, the sudden stops. They had all added up quietly, waiting their turn. Then one night, during a routine drive, everything changed. A sharp pain. A sudden stop. The sound of something tearing. The arena fell silent. Not because everyone understood immediately, but because something felt wrong. Kobe walked to the free throw line. He made both shots, and then he walked off the court, slowly, without help. The moment became legend, but for Kobe, it was something else. It was reality. Recovery was lonely. The gym was still there. The ball was still there. But the body was not the same. He trained differently now. More carefully, more deliberately. He learned patience the hard way. The mirror became honest. It showed him limits he had never accepted before. And for the first time, he had to listen. This was a new challenge. Not an opponent, not a rival, but himself. Recovery changed everything. The days no longer began with intensity. They began with caution. Movements were slower. Warm-ups were longer. Every session was a negotiation with his body. Kobe learned to listen in a new way, not to emotion, not to desire, but to limitation. And limitation was unfamiliar. There were days he could not practice. Days he could only watch. And watching, for him, was harder than training. He sat on the bench and studied, not just the game, but the players, the rhythm, the spacing, the timing. He began to see basketball from above, not just inside it. The injuries kept coming. Knees, shoulders, fingers. Each one took something, and each one taught something. He began to understand that effort alone was no longer enough, that wisdom mattered, that patience mattered, that survival mattered. In the quiet of rehab rooms, he reflected on the cost of obsession, on the years he had given, on the life he had postponed. He began to write more, to read more, to think about who he was beyond the court. For the first time since childhood, basketball was not the center of every day, and that absence was unsettling. But slowly, something else filled the space. Perspective. He spoke differently now, to teammates, to younger players. Not about pushing harder, but about listening sooner. The game was teaching him again, just in a different way. As the seasons passed, Kobe began to accept what he could no longer control. Not easily, not quickly, but honestly. The body that once answered every demand now asked for care. And for the first time in his life, he gave it. He adjusted his game. Fewer explosive drives, more footwork, more timing, more patience. The work changed, but the intention stayed the same. He learned to conserve energy, to choose moments, to lead with presence, not just performance. There were nights he could not finish games. Nights he watched from the bench, hands wrapped in ice, mind still racing. And in those moments, he felt both loss and gratitude. Loss for what was fading, gratitude for what had been. He spoke openly about the end now, not with sadness, with clarity. Basketball had given him everything, and now it was asking him to let go. He prepared for that moment the same way he had prepared for everything else, with intention. The gym was still his home, but it was no longer his identity. And in that space, between effort and rest, between past and future, Kobe found something new: peace. The final season arrived without surprise. Kobe had already told the world this would be the last time. Every arena felt different now. Crowds stood a little longer. Applause lasted a little deeper into the night. Opponents paused before tip-off. Not out of fear, out of respect. The game moved faster around him. Younger players ran harder. Bodies were fresher. But Kobe moved with intention. He chose moments carefully. He conserved energy. He made every movement matter. There were nights he struggled. Shots fell short. Legs felt heavy. But the crowd never left. They stayed for the presence, for the memory, for the chance to say goodbye. In every city, he was honored. Tributes played on screens. Old highlights flickered, and the noise followed him everywhere. But Kobe remained quiet. He still arrived early. He still practiced alone. He still prepared the same way. Because this season was not about performance. It was about closure. Each game felt like a final chapter being written slowly. One possession at a time. One breath at a time. He listened to the crowd differently now, not as pressure, but as gratitude. And as the season moved forward, one night waited ahead. A night that would hold everything. The last game. The final night arrived quietly. The building filled early. People took their seats long before warm-ups began. Not because they expected a show, but because they did not want to miss a moment. The air felt different, thicker, heavier, as if everyone understood what this night meant. Kobe stepped onto the court slowly. He looked around once, not to take it in, but to steady himself. The game began without ceremony. Shots missed. Legs felt heavy. Time moved forward, just like it always does. And then something shifted. Not all at once. Gradually. The ball found his hands, again and again. The crowd leaned in. The noise grew. Shot by shot, The rhythm returned. The body remembered. He drove. He stopped. He faded. The net answered. The points stacked up quietly. 30, 50. The arena could barely breathe. It was not disbelief. It was recognition. Everyone understood they were witnessing something rare. Not greatness, closure. With each basket, the years folded into the present. The child in Italy, the teenager in high school, the champion, the competitor. All of them shared the same moment. And when the scoreboard reached 60, time seemed to pause. The game ended. The noise stayed. And Kobe stood still at center court, breathing, remembering. When the final buzzer sounded, Kobe did not raise his arms. He did not celebrate. He simply stood there, breathing. The jersey clung to him, heavy with sweat. The years were in that fabric. Every practice, every injury, every moment of doubt. It was all there. The crowd roared, but he barely heard it. The noise felt distant now, like waves hitting a shore far away. He walked slowly to the bench, sat down, and for a moment the world stopped moving. Then he stood again. A microphone was placed in his hand. The arena fell silent. He did not give a speech. He did not explain the journey. He did not try to capture the moment with words. He thanked the crowd. He thanked the city. And then, with calm certainty, he said the words that would echo far beyond that night. Mamba out. There was no encore, no return, no second goodbye. He walked off the court the same way he had walked onto it years earlier, quietly, without looking back. The lights dimmed, the court emptied, and the building slowly returned to silence. For the first time in his life, there was no next game to prepare for, no next practice to plan, no next season waiting. Only space. And in that space, a chapter closed, completely. When the noise finally faded, Kobe Bryant's story did not end. It changed shape. There were no more schedules to follow, no more practices to plan, no more games waiting at the end of the week. For the first time since childhood, time opened up in front of him, and he stepped into it slowly. Mornings became quieter. No alarms, no rush. Just light through windows, and moments that did not need to be measured. He spent time with his family, with his daughters, with conversations that had been postponed for years, not because he had forgotten them, but because the work had demanded everything. Now that work was finished, and what remained was reflection. He began to speak differently, not about winning, but about learning, not about trophies, but about discipline, not about success, but about the process. He spoke to younger players, not as a star, but as a guide. He told them that greatness was built quietly, that repetition mattered more than talent, that patience was the real advantage. The world listened, not because of who he had been, but because of how he had lived. And slowly, his legacy became something larger than basketball. It became a way of approaching life, a way of committing fully to something, a way of showing up, even when no one is watching. The gym was no longer his home, but the lessons he learned there followed him everywhere. And in that quiet space, away from the noise of arenas, Kobe finally rested. In the years that followed, the influence of his journey became clearer. Not in statistics, not in banners, but in habits. Players across the world trained differently. They arrived earlier, stayed longer, paid attention to details they once ignored, because they had seen what was possible when discipline became identity. Children practiced alone in driveways, in empty gyms, in quiet corners of playgrounds, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to feel the same calm. Mamba mentality became more than a phrase. It became permission. Permission to care deeply. Permission to repeat endlessly. Permission to be patient with progress. And that idea moved far beyond basketball. Artists used it. Writers used it. Students used it. Anyone who had ever tried to master something found themselves returning to the same lesson. That consistency builds confidence. That focus builds freedom. That time, when used well, becomes your greatest ally. Kobe's legacy was not perfection. It was effort, not success, but commitment. Even after his passing, the echoes remained in the way people approached their work, in the way they prepared, in the way they stayed when others left. He had shown the world something simple, that greatness is built quietly, and that quiet work never truly disappears. As this story comes to an end, there is nothing left to prove, no final lesson to force, no moment to replay, only a quiet understanding that greatness is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not rush. It is built slowly, through days that look the same, through effort that goes unnoticed, through patience that is rarely rewarded immediately. Kobe Bryant's journey reminds us of this, that the work matters, even when no one sees it, especially when no one sees it. In empty gyms, in early mornings, in late nights. That is where the real story lived, not in the banners, not in the noise, but in the silence between moments. And now, as the night grows still, this story can rest. You can let it drift into the background, like the echo of a ball bouncing one last time on an empty court. Slowly, steadily, calmly. Tomorrow, the work can begin again, or it can wait. For now, there is nothing you need to do. The lights are off. The gym is empty. And somewhere, the rhythm continues. Good night.